Hello and welcome to another episode of This Much is True Crime. It's an emergency episode, Professor Wilson, isn't it?
It really is, and we're responding in real time to a manhunt that's ongoing. And so maybe could you set up for our listeners what the hell's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an emergency episode that literally, I'm trying to find a corner of the house that's not being used on a Saturday morning, and here I am, and I've just been out for my morning coffee, and my eyes were peeled for any sign of Hadush Kebatu. Don't know what age he is. That's the way asylum seekers go. It could be 38, it could be 41, 42. We don't know. But he is now, I'm loath to say he's even on the run because I don't know if he even thinks he's or knows that he is on the run. But whatever happened, he was mistakenly freed from Chelmsford prison yesterday. He, of course, was the character who sparked all those riots in the summer outside the Bell Hotel in Epping because he was eventually found guilty of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl and a woman in Essex while staying at that hotel. And he was jailed for a year, but of course under the new laws, basically what happens is, time spent in prison, and he's under 12 months, so he's deported straight away. Having said that, this was over a month ago, Professor Wilson, that he was convicted, and he was still in jail yesterday until he wasn't. By some mistake, he was meant to be put in a van, to be taken to a detention centre, then to be processed, to be put on a plane back to Ethiopia. But guess what? He's out. And there are pictures, astonishing pictures, taken by the public in Chelmsford High Street yesterday of him in his prison tracksuit with his prison bag and probably the £76 he gets, to get him through the first week of being on the outside. You could see through the plastic bag the Salvation Army's war crime magazines in there. He's asking directions to this train station.
I know.
And he's now in London, we understand. So I was out this morning just looking around, could that be him? Could it not be him? Because there are 15,000 Ethiopians in London. So he'll have gone to ground somewhere now. And if they ever find him, who knows? But that's where we're at. But what a blunder, or was it?
Okay, so the first thing to say, he's not on the run. It was a mistake, and therefore he has been, even if he shouldn't have been released, he was actually released. And so in terms of the legal process, it's not his fault. He has not breached the perimeter security of the jail. He has been allowed to leave the jail. He's not technically on the run. When I was a junior governor, Martin, one of the jobs the junior governor always had to take on board was to check release dates, to check the time that somebody should be released against the warrant that we were holding in terms of keeping that person in custody. And it would take me all day. I would have to go through everybody's warrant and calculate or recalculate the release date of everybody in the jail. Now, it is the case that there can be human error. And often I was saying to administration officers, look, I think he should be released a week later or a week earlier. There can be human error, especially if prisoners have the same surname, or if they have prison numbers that are very similar, or if there are difficulties in relation to time they've spent on remand, or if we've got other warrants for them. And remember, so it is possible for there to be human error. I've got absolutely no doubt about that. But in terms of mistaken releases, the numbers of mistaken releases in the prison service in the last 12 months have increased by 100% over the previous 12 months. I mean, I looked at the figures until March 2025, 262 people had been wrongly released as opposed to 115 in the 12 months previously. And the prison service are saying quite sanguinely, well, there are human errors, and because the time that you could be released was reduced from 50% to 40%, there were some difficulties when people were processing the warrants that were holding those prisoners. And so it seems to me there could be human error, but the thing that I've got, and I know it's usually you that say this to me, but I'm saying this to you. HMP Chelmsford is a remand centre, and therefore its entire function, its only reason for being, is to process people in and back out again. And therefore it is dealing with warrants and calculations all the time. That is its function. And for the highest profile prisoner, because he was the highest profile prisoner in the prison service, to be mistakenly released, to me, just smells really fishy. I'm prepared to accept there is human error, but for me, there is something that needs to be really thoroughly investigated about how the highest profile prisoner in our country was wrongly released as opposed to being processed to an immigration and detention centre.
Now, this isn't about turn, because you're right, it's usually me that promotes the conspiracy theories in our discussions. Now, you're suggesting, it's quite a bold accusation here, that it may well be someone who supports the cause of reform, or those who are very against immigrants and the immigration policies, could have done this deliberately, just to cause trouble, to highlight it.
Yes, I think that's what I'm saying. I'm prepared to accept that there has to be an investigation, and it may very well come down to human error, a genuine human error. But don't you think this feeds into a narrative about broken Britain, a narrative in which we are constantly criticizing the one in, one out system with France? You know, the first guy that gets removed in the one in, one out system is able to get on a small boat to come back. Yabu sucks, government. Look how rubbish your system is. And here we've got the highest profile prisoner in the whole country who is the cause of riots, in Essex, being released wrongly. That for me feeds into a narrative. And there will be some staff who will be not just in Chelmsford, but there will be prison officers who will be attracted to the narrative, which is saying there is something wrong with our immigration system. And I noted, Martin, that the officer who wrongly discharged Kebatu hasn't been suspended. The prison governor could suspend the officer, but if you read carefully what the prison service has said, he has simply been removed. He or she, I don't know, so I should say he or she. He or she has simply been removed from discharging duties. Now, why is the governor not suspending somebody in these circumstances? If I had been the governor of that prison, prior to there even being an investigation, I would have suspended that member of staff.
It's broken Britain, it may well be. For me, it's the inability of this government to read the room, to see, what is the main, even more than the cost of living. I think the immigration, the small boats crisis is what's going to do it for this government if they have to go to an election, possibly in the local elections next spring. And those people who think it's the small boats to blame will blame them for the cost of living or not getting doctor's appointments. We know all those things. They may be right, they may be wrong. But just the inability to read the room. Now, it came out quite recently. We have the highest number of civil servants in this country in 19 years. There's more than 500,000 people who are civil servants. Could Keir Starmer or his new, hardline Home Secretary, well, not exactly hardline now, or his deputy leader in the government, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, could they not actually just take one civil servant and perhaps put them onto this case to say, I don't care, whether you have to give up. It's only going to be a month or so, because bear in mind he was convicted last month, so it's just 4 weeks. Just go and sit in a tent outside that jail. Go and sleep in the cell next door to him. But you got to make sure that person gets on that plane, because this is the picture. And the picture that is doing the rounds is his mugshot, but also the picture of him in the high street, with passers-by taking pictures of him. You do wonder, why didn't the passers-by, some good citizens, just follow the character and let the police know as they're following him? Because why would you take a picture of him anyway? But anyhow, there are now pictures existing of this, and there's 3 police forces trying to catch this man. You know, everyone will be looking for him at the cost of millions, no doubt. This could all have been averted if they just think, right, this is one thing that has to work. This has to work, and just one of you, 500,000, just go and spend a month doing that. I'll pay you overtime. I don't care. But he has to get on that plane back to Ethiopia. Do you know, David, the new head of the border force,
Yeah.
the one in, one out, he was asked, so how many people are working on this scheme? 12. 12 people are working on the one in, one out. Britain's biggest immigration policy. 12 people working on it. And it's not.
I didn't know those numbers at all. I think you're right. It is about the government, the Home Office can say anything it wants to the area manager, to the Director General of the Prison Service, and the Director General of the Prison Service can speak to the appropriate area manager that's in charge of, it'll be a number of prisons that will include Chelmsford, and say, we want one of your staff to be constantly on top of this issue. Of course, all of those things are appropriate. And of course, we're talking in light of what happened in Caerphilly, that Plaid Cymru wins and Reform comes second, and Labour loses Caerphilly for the first time in 100 years. And again, Reform comes second because of immigration and illegal immigration being so high up the political agenda. And what I'm suggesting, though, Martin, is this is my disagreement with what you said. This isn't about Labour being unable to read the room. I cannot see a set of circumstances in which the highest profile prisoner in the entire prison system gets released mistakenly. I do not see a set of circumstances, knowing the prison service as I do, from having worked as a prison governor, how no prison governor, no member of staff would be aware that you should not be releasing Kebatu, but in fact taking him to an immigration and detention centre. I just do not know any set of circumstances in which that would have happened by accident. I'm prepared to be proven wrong, but for me, this reeks of something much more serious. And I would encourage the prison service to have an independent investigation. I'm absolutely aware of the amount of corruption that's going on in our prisons at the minute. And who knows? Who knows, Martin? If you can turn a prison officer, if you can corrupt a prison officer to turn a blind eye to drones coming in with drugs, drones coming in with knives, drones coming in with mobile phones, who's to say you can't get a prison officer not just to turn a blind eye, but to actively release somebody that shouldn't be released, because that will cause major political embarrassment to the government of the day.
And it has, and you've got, as I said, 3 police forces, going through CCTV trying to find out where he went. I mean, I suppose the good thing is he's in London. He probably got off that train about this time yesterday. So he'll be in London, and there's, outside of Beijing, I think we have the most CCTV cameras, in the world, really. Certainly if you sort of go more than 20 miles an hour in this city or go into a bus lane, they pick you up quick enough. So you'd like to think they might be able to track where he got when he got off the train. Having said that, as I said at the start, there's 15,000 Ethiopians in London, and he'll just melt away into that crowd, won't he?
I think so. But I do think that there will be, my sense is of people that I've spoken to who have been on the run. And remember, he's not on the run. He was mistakenly released. It's not his fault. But my sense of speaking to people who have previously been on the run is that they often have a community infrastructure that allows them to survive for a period of time without popping their head above the parapet, without being seen. Now, from what I understand about Kebatu's background, albeit there are 15,000 Ethiopians already living in London, Kebatu wouldn't have had that kind of family that were living here, as far as I'm aware, that might be able to support him whilst he is at large, as it were. And so some of the infrastructure that would normally allow someone to be on the run for a long period of time, I don't think is going to be available to him. And the Ethiopian community within London are law-abiding. They'll be aware as much as anybody else that supporting Kebatu is not going to make them popular within the culture. So I think he should be caught relatively quickly, is my sense of this. But it's not the capture. I know you want to call this manhunt. My sense is he'll be caught relatively quickly. My feeling is much more about how the hell did this happen? And I would not give up on that if I was the Home Secretary, the Justice Secretary. I would not give up on that if I was the Director General of the Prison Service or the area manager or indeed the governor of HMP Chelmsford. This prison is set up as a remand centre. It does this every single day, and they are used to releasing people correctly. And here we've got the highest profile prisoner in the entire system incorrectly and wrongly released. For me, there is something fundamentally fishy about what has happened.
See, my reading of the room suggestion doesn't just go to the fact that, it's a story out there, you've got to close it down, it should never have happened. They should have read the room, for your suggestion that perhaps, he's in a jail in Essex, perhaps there's sympathy for what was going on there, we've got to be very careful here. Why was he not tagged, for God's sake? I appreciate you don't get tagged until you leave prison. I'd tag him every second he was in that jail, and then we'd know where he was, at least. And what I would do now, and again, I thought, just having a chat with some friends before this happened, just a few weeks ago, and it's not the first time that this government has just had sort of an egg in its face. I thought, should I offer my services to them? I've been in PR before, I've been in news a lot, spent all my whole life in that. Should I offer my services to them as a comms consultant or comms director? Because I can see it, you can see it, Fleet Street certainly sees it. You can see this thing coming a mile off. Why would you not just put things in place to prevent it happening? And I tell you this, again, what they should be doing, and they can have this one for free, they should have someone, when he is caught, now whether it's a police officer or one of the 500,000 civil servants, who gets him in a fast car and they go straight to Heathrow, and he sits in Heathrow, not in an executive lounge, in those hard seats, and sleeps overnight until the next plane is leaving for Addis Ababa, and you get on that plane with him and you drop him off at the airport and get the plane back. But he doesn't go back to a remand centre, he doesn't go to a detention centre, he's going straight to the airport, straight on a plane, right now, and guess what? Human rights, sorry, but you take pictures, every 5 minutes and you post them and say, he's going home and he's going home now.
Well, we have talked about not reading the room and the PR of the government before, you and I hope they hear what you are saying. The only thing I would also add to that plea is that I've said to you on the pod before, Martin, that prisons rarely generate a crisis. People don't really bother that much about what happens in our prisons. And I think I pointed out when we were talking about the murder of the Lost Prophets singer, the murder rate in prison is often higher than the murder rate in the community. That doesn't really generate too much of a crisis. And we've also got to remember that our prisons are overcrowded. Our prisons are understaffed. Our prison officers are poorly trained. There is poor managerial oversight. And by and large, you can get away with that. You can get away with that because the public doesn't really care that much in relation to what's going on inside our jails. But on this occasion, I think this should be grabbing the public's attention because it's drawing attention to a bigger issue. And that bigger issue isn't just about illegal immigration and the offences committed by illegal immigrants. It's drawing attention to how do we want to deliver justice in this country? How capable are we of making sure that a prisoner should go to jail and spend the appropriate length of time, behind bars before he's released from jail. And that to me gets back to training, it gets back to management, it gets back to oversight, it gets back to just simply valuing what happens in our prisons as opposed to ignoring what happens in our prisons.
And of course, just a final thing, Philly, if when we spoke this morning, should we do this? Well, there's not much to say. Turns out there is quite a bit to say about this, isn't there? If it was an inside job, which is what you're kind of alluding to, it wouldn't just be one person, though, would it? Because this character will be well known throughout the whole jail, and surely there'd be a whole bunch of people who would see him walking out there with his, see-through plastic bag and his war cry, thinking, "Oh, he's off, but surely he should be going on a plane, not into town."
You get to a really important point there. This can't just be one person responsible. I started the pod today, didn't I, by saying I had checked the release dates against the warrants and made calculations, spoke to to the administration officers, the civil servants within the prison. Those calculations then get sent to prison officers who are responsible for the discharge of prisoners. So this can't just have been one person. This has to have been a number of people, or it should have been a number of people, checking who was being discharged on that day. There would have been a list. There would have been a list of prisoners who were going to be just discharged that day. And that list is produced and then handed to staff to ensure that the discharge takes place. And guess what? You don't just have the prisoners waiting to be discharged. They have to be collected from the cells where they are located. And therefore, somebody has to have gone on the wing and go, "Where's Kebatu? We're discharging Kebatu." And people on the wing are going to have gone, "Why are you discharging him? He should be going to an immigration and detention center." This, to me, is a much bigger issue than the mistake of a person. There has to have been concerted effort to have wrongly released the highest profile prisoner in the entire penal estate.
Maybe, just maybe, he'll turn himself in. I mean, he'll see. He doesn't speak good English, I understand, but maybe, if he is in the community with the Ethiopians, law-abiding, maybe someone will say, "Look, the best thing you can do, because they'll get you eventually, is just turn yourself in, and that will stand you in good stead." But he said in court he just wanted to go home to Ethiopia. Well, you'll be in a plane very quickly.
Well, let's hope that's the case.
David, maybe he's on a tube on his way to Heathrow now. Maybe he's going to try and get on a plane. Who knows?
Well, let's hope that that is the case. But my problem with that, Martin, is if he doesn't speak good English, he'll think that he's going to be punished for what has happened, and it isn't his responsibility.
Well, he should be punished for what happened. I mean, bear in mind his assault on a 14-year-old.
Oh yes, no. I mean, yes, he should be punished for that, but he might think he's going to be punished for the fact that he has been wrongly released. Do you see? So he might not realize that legally it's not his responsibility that he was wrongly released. It was the prison's responsibility that he was wrongly released. So he might be fearful that he's going to be punished for that.
And just a final point, the use of, I love the word manhunt. It's just a sexy kind of criminal word, isn't it, manhunt? And I take your point, it probably isn't a manhunt, but it suits the authorities to use the word manhunt because it makes Kebatu out to be the one at fault here, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's not his responsibility. It isn't legally him that's done something that is wrong. He has not breached the perimeter security of the jail illegally. He has been allowed to go. And he can he's got an absolute defense about, what happened. It wasn't him. He was told to go. And of course, whatever happens to the prison officer who has been removed from discharging duties, I am sure I could construct for that officer a credible defense. It was a very busy day. I was given this. I hadn't been trained to do this in the past. Nobody was there that I could ask if this was appropriate. I did think he shouldn't be released, but I had this warrant that allowed me to say that he should go. I'm sure I could construct a defense. But for me, this shows yet again the something is wrong in our prisons, and I am not prepared to simply say at this stage this was a human error as opposed to something far more fishy.
Let's see how long it takes before he comes back into custody. Professor, for the time being, thank you very much indeed.
And I liked the new kitchen look here, Martin. This is very, very nice. Or the sunlight, it
Well,
really makes your hair
it's it's
lovely.
it's always been here. It's just that usually I do it in the other room where it's a bit quieter and it's quite echoey. So I'm going to try and use AI to take the echo out of my voice. Maybe as you're hearing this, it has gone and AI's done its magic. But it's always been here. It's just that I don't use it because usually there are people in here, cooking and doing things. But maybe people like it. I'll do more. And I'll show you around. Maybe I'll do a little garden tour, shall I?
Make sure Kabatu's not in that garden.
God, I honestly did. I went for a coffee this morning and I was looking around just thinking, he could be here. Of course he could be here. I'll tell you what, where I used to work at White City Shepherd's Bush, that's where there's a big Ethiopian community. And you'd like to think, can't help but think, that that's where police will be sort of, concentrating a lot of their activities just now in that area. In the
Yeah.
case, that's where he's kind of sort of disappeared into.
Yeah. And as you say, I think the figure that I always quote is that there is one CCTV camera for every 13 people living in London. It is the most surveyed
Yeah.
city outside of Beijing.
Yeah, I've got the parking tickets, I've got the fines and the penalties to prove that, absolutely, but they can't catch him. What does that say? Professor, thank you so much.
So good talking to you again.
Bye now.
Bye.